So today's election prediction is going to be with Senator Joe Manchin from the great state of West Virginia, pretty much Trump country, coal country, and everything American versus, of course, the president, Donald Trump. So this will be pretty interesting. West Virginia was one of the few states that gave Donald Trump a margin of over 30%, and Donald Trump was the first presidential candidate on the Republican side to win in a state like West Virginia by such a large margin. So the state of West Virginia voted for Donald Trump with every single county compared to 1992, where Bill Clinton, the husband of Hillary Clinton, won nearly every county in the state of West Virginia. So definitely times have changed, and the state itself is pretty Democratic. Now, that's a lot. I know it's really hard to comprehend how this state could be Democratic, but it's a different type of Democratic. The new Democratic Party, the ones that represent Barack Obama, John Kerry, Al Gore, is not the type of Democratic Party that West Virginia rallied behind. Yes, there were some more racial undertones. Yes, there was much more division and a much more prominence of the white population in the Democratic Party at the time. And this was the party that dominated a state like West Virginia. Yes, it was also the state that broke away from Virginia during the Civil War. However, it's still predominantly Republican, but it does have those Democratic roots. The state was safe Democratic in 1992, 1996. It was an extreme shocker that George Bush was able to carry it in 2000 and yet again in 2004. Became a toss-up in 2008, and then from there on, was a safe Republican state, and that's just based off how the parties have shifted. A couple decades ago, the Democratic Party does not align with where it was back then, and Joe Manchin is that conservative type Democratic that could win in a state like West Virginia. But since we are talking about a presidential map, this map is going to look extremely different. So, starting off with the poll closings, we're going to do it how I usually don't do it, and that starts off with 7 p.m. leading all the way up to 1 a.m., filling in each state with no toss-ups. So Indiana, Kentucky, and South Carolina all go to Donald Trump. Kentucky and Indiana, I think, could get a little bit close, but South Carolina solidly in the Trump column. Over in Vermont, I see a Manchin victory just based off the Democratic title by his name, but down in Georgia, Trump is probably going to hold that one off. Over in West Virginia, I see a Joe Manchin victory. It's pretty easy to see how Joe Manchin would carry the state of West Virginia, coming from that state, being a pretty popular senator. Yes, it's a Republican state. Yes, it loves Donald Trump, but Joe Manchin is from that country, that type of the country, and, West Virginia, time and time again, votes with its own candidates. So I think West Virginia would go to Joe Manchin. I didn't fill in Virginia yet, but again, Virginia is pretty much solid for Senator Joe Manchin. North Carolina, I also see going to Senator Joe Manchin, just based off the fact that he can have a much better Southern appeal and better appeals to these type of voters compared to Ohio, where I think Trump could narrowly edge out a victory. Then we move on to the 10 p.m. poll closing. Sorry, the 8 p.m. poll closings. I don't know what I just said. But up in the Northeast, Manchin territory for obvious reasons. Then over in the South, the rest of the South, Joe Manchin will probably lose a number of these states, but make them close. Illinois goes to Joe Manchin. New Hampshire goes to Joe Manchin. I don't see a Trump victory there. Up in Maine, I think Trump will still carry that one electoral vote, but it will be a lot closer just based off Manchin's popularity. He's not known nationwide, but could easily do so, as Bernie Sanders did. Over in Pennsylvania, I see Joe Manchin easily carrying the state of Pennsylvania, appealing to the steel, coal workers. This is definitely going to land him a victory here, just holding on to that typical Democratic vote, along with those voters that voted for Donald Trump but voted for Democrats in previous election years. 8:30 comes around, Arkansas goes to Trump, and then up across the United States, Trump wins. Over in that Nebraska 2nd District, though, I think Manchin could narrowly secure a victory, but Arizona's just gone for Joe Manchin, in my opinion. Over in New York, I see a Manchin victory for obvious reasons. Minnesota goes to Joe Manchin. The rest of the Rust Belt also goes to Senator Joe Manchin, and the reason behind that is the Rust Belt probably isn't going to turn away from the president anytime soon. I'm sorry, it's not going to turn away from the Democratic Party anytime soon. We saw it happen in 2016. Just think of it as the state of Indiana in 2008. It voted for Barack Obama by a very narrow margin. As we saw in the Rust Belt, everyone was talking about he'll carry Indiana again, he'll carry North Carolina again, he may expand and carry Missouri, because only one president before won his re-election with less electoral votes than the first time, and that was Woodrow Wilson. Well, the second president to do that was President Barack Obama, and Donald Trump is likely going to be the third if he does win re-election. The Rust Belt is probably not going back to the GOP for a very long time. By very long time, I mean a decade or so. That's a very long time. But not in election years, probably in like 3 to 4 elections, it may actually become safe red. But as of right now, it still holds its Democratic identity true to its heart. And West Virginia, showing in these special elections, have increasingly become more Democratic. In these governor elections coming up, this is going to be a big shocker to the GOP. West Virginia is probably going to stay red. Pennsylvania probably won't. Michigan probably won't. Wisconsin probably won't. Again, we're not there yet, so you can't say that I'm going to be wrong automatically, nor can I say I'm automatically going to be right. These are election predictions. They are predictions, meaning it's not certain to happen, but it's what I think would happen as of today, May 25th, 2018. So, when 2020 comes around, don't come back to this video and say Joe Manchin wasn't even the nominee. Yes, I'll understand that, and I'll get to it when I get to it. But right now, these are just election predictions, so don't get too upset with them. Keep in mind, we're all human, and all humans make mistakes. Colorado and New Mexico goes to Senator Joe Manchin, and then Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania we'll talk about in just a moment. Florida we'll talk about in just a moment. Iowa we'll talk about in just a moment. Montana goes to Trump. Nevada goes to Joe Manchin. I just see it going to Joe Manchin based off how it's voted with its Democratic identity in the past. History tells us Nevada's going blue. Idaho obviously going red. Hawaii going blue. Washington going blue. Oregon going blue. And California going blue. And Alaska, of course, goes to the president. But now we're going to talk about the states that I told you we would talk about. So first, starting off with Pennsylvania. So I fill this one in blue. But I think this one is going to be the most hotly contested. It comes from an area where Donald Trump neighbors in New York, obviously in Washington, D.C. now, but at that time in New York, he had neighbored Pennsylvania, whereas West Virginia also neighbors Pennsylvania. In the area closest to West Virginia, you could see Manchin, running up the map, getting a little bit more votes than he normally would. But keep in mind, Trump's going to keep that white working class base, but not all of it. And when you lose a small portion of that narrowly puts you over the top, that goes back to Joe Manchin, and that's why I gave it in the Democratic column. Florida, I see going to Donald Trump for 2 reasons. Number one, the conservative base is still pretty strong. Yes, they see Joe Manchin as a new voice in the Democratic Party. Yes, he's someone who's reasonable and can work on bipartisan issues, but again, they still hold that conservatism true to their heart. Maybe a decade ago, Manchin could have ran up the map, won states like Georgia, Ohio, Missouri, Indiana, Florida. But that's not the type of nation we live in today. We live in a nation that is so strictly divided by our political beliefs that a state like Florida probably won't flip for just someone like Joe Manchin. You would need someone like Senator Joe Biden. Manchin would turn off progressives. He would possibly turn off some moderates. And yes, he'll gain some Republican votes, but it might not be enough. Whereas in North Carolina, the conservative vote is definitely having a much more heavy presence, and the stakes will be much higher in a state like North Carolina and Florida. Now, before you come after me for that statement, yes, Florida is talked about a lot, but North Carolina hasn't gone Democratic in a long time, and North Carolina definitely shares some similar values compared to down in Florida. I mean, a number of people in the South segregate Florida from the rest of the South because, again, the ideals are much more urbanized. It's not a lot of agriculture that is prominent in the Rust Belt. It's not technically a part of the Bible Belt. A lot of the values are different compared to states like North Carolina and West Virginia, which are much more closely related. And over in Iowa, the final call I give to President Trump, giving him a final call with final count of 239 electoral votes to Senator Joe Manchin's 299. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I'll see you all tomorrow.